My writing is often about, I guess, nature. But I also, I grew up in Omaha, so I'm a Nebraska writer, but I grew up in an urban environment. I think it's kind of important because not all Nebraska writers write about farms and cows and landscape. I mean, there is some of that in my poetry, but not only that. I think sometimes there is some humor. I think also in my writing, now I'm trying to write kind of more about relationships, about just any sort of relationship at all, friendship, employee, employer, whatever, but just something to get more people into my poetry. So it's not just, because I don't like poets, no, let me rephrase that. I just get kind of tired of poets, and have been the worst offender that write only about themselves, where it's just I. I'll just read a lot of poetry. Like I read this great book, just came out from Dave McCleary's A Slow Tempo Press. It's by Nancy Peters Hastings. It's called A Quiet I Carry With Me. Read that book, loved it. I know Nancy she's worked on a conference that I helped sponsor. And she's just the best person in the world in terms of how generous she is with all the public work that she does as a poet. And I read her book and loved it. And so I read that whole book, and after you read that book, you want to sit down and write some of your own stuff. So I read a little bit, and then I kind of think about who do I want to write about now? What person, whose turn is it? And I just plan on sort of slowly working through all the people I know, and eventually they'll all have a poem written about them. I wrote, "This is getting lost," after reading Nancy Peters Hastings' A Quiet I Carry With Me. And it's just, I read and I get inspired by what I read. It's sort of like you hear a voice in your head, or you just sort of have that poet's rhythm, and it makes you kind of want to create your own. So I wrote that one after reading it. It's usually the way I write everything. Phosphorescent headlights ribbon the black road. The planes of your face catch the abrupt wash of cool light. Dinner conversation, food on your lips. You in black in a black room. The projector clicks half light. Scenes of an archaeological dig. This is getting lost. Missing time and place. Doubling and tripling back. Searching. Jazz on the stereo. A voice and a piano. Diffuse the way there. These things deserve the sharpness of our attention. The world's first portrait on a coin. The world's first stone set in gold. The floor plan of a palace. This is getting lost, caught up in the presentation, missing our turn, now trapped, driving. Luminous white bleeds through the night's film. That's a more recent poem, because I was thinking about this reading, and I knew I wanted to have something new to read. I just wanted to try out the same old familiar stuff. So I wrote that especially for this reading. This is an older poem called Hanging On. At one point I was trying to write poems about my family, and so this is a poem about an aunt that I was very fond of. Aunt Dolores, I know if you were ever faced with doubts, you still woke up an hour early to pack sack lunches. You were constant as the nightlight in your hall, a beneficent moon. You were scrawny and tough, like the cotton plant in sand in your basement, assured of flowering because the odds were against it. You were a rag, a bone, and a hank of hair as you spooned mashed potatoes and yams and jello onto your children's plates. I wish I could be like you, joking your way through loud family reunions and country western songs on the record player, through evenings watching television in the dark, through all-night poker games, your husband's friends, beer and cigarette smoke. Aunt Dolores, you've known all along we all must be deserted sometime, the way cotton seeds fall away from the stem. And that is why you sent your kids to school every morning with a kiss and a shove, as if pushing them away from you. And kind of on the same lines, here's a poem about my brother. And this one's called The Boy Who Lives in the Backyard. The boy who lives in the backyard is the one who would still ask to pick up the dead cicada silent on the sidewalk, or chase a runaway dachshund down 2 blocks of sun until the dog darts into a neighborhood bar, stands and blinks in the new dark. Superman in a blue bath towel, safety pinned at the neck. The boy who lives in the backyard has the courage to split an eyebrow against a table edge as he pretends to fly. The courage to run from the crazy neighbor who would chase him and his friends, make them lie face down in the alley. The courage to sit on a 10-foot wall, cupping an ochre kitten in his palms, wearing white shoes and belt for the bleary photo, white adhesive tape over the split eyebrow, always healing, kitten cupped in his palms, always safe over a 10-foot drop. And then this next poem is To Make a Record, and it's about leaving a town. To make a record. The friend you see without recognizing on the street, your teeth locked on the edge of the water glass. When the rain has ended, what's left? Pockets of comfort, the hollow Santa you stepped on when moving out, the screen flickering Murder, She Wrote, a bag of Christmas cookies, your blue falcon rounding the cloverleaf, the radio playing ELO's Strange Magic, the first time outside matched inside. Now left spinning on the turntable is the feeble record, static on the speakers. A voice written, and I think everyone does, like everyone, like if you think about when you were a kid, chances are, you wrote something. You might have written a poem or, but basically everyone writes, and what happens is some people kind of stop writing. But I think we all begin writing. And so I've always written. I can't say that I've always liked it, even though I'm an English major. It's as difficult to get me started writing as it is, I think, anyone. It's just getting started is the hard part. Once I get into it, then I love it. But, I have the same sort of procrastination that everyone else does. And so I can't say that I've always liked it. It's something I've always done. But there was one time, maybe just a couple years ago, where I was kind of going through some difficult times in my career, and I kind of got tired of talking to my friends about it, and of course they got tired of listening, and so what I did instead was I went and wrote about it, and I'm never going to do anything with what I wrote. I didn't write it for the end product. I wrote it for the act of writing it, and I found out that I felt so much better after having sat down and written about those problems. And at that point, I realized I felt like I had developed a relationship with writing. Just like, you have a relationship with your parents, you have a relationship with your friends, whatever. You should have, if you're a writer, you should write because you want to write, not for any other reason, not to be published or not to make money, because God knows you never will, but to write because you want to write. And that's when I found that out. I found I've been doing this all this time because I want to, and because I feel like I have a developed relationship with writing. It doesn't just happen. You do have to keep at it over time. A poem's not like a novel where you can, pick up with the next chapter. Once you've got a poem done, there's a certain amount of panic. It's like, what will I write about next? So if you have some sort of system or some sort of plan, it makes the writing easier. You don't get writer's block. Some prose now rather than some poetry, just for a little bit. And this is actually, I'm just going to read some selections from a column that I wrote that was in the Journal Star. And this one was called Life Happens in the Margins, and I'm just reading segments from it. We tend to think of marginal as meaning unimportant, and yet so much of life takes place on the margins. At his talk in Lincoln last January, Native American poet John Trudell said, this is a quote, "I used to daydream a lot when I was young. Maybe I still do. The daydreams always made me feel better. But the teachers said they didn't like it because, I don't know, I guess they thought I might grow up and be daydreaming on the assembly line and would staple my butt to the wall or something. And I came to understand later that the energy as a man that I was using to make myself feel paranoid and insecure was the same energy I had used as a boy to daydream and make myself feel better. Daydreaming, which we consider a marginal activity, a non-productive or even counterproductive behavior, might actually be a way for us to make some important decisions in our lives. Although my daydreams about my being a teacher never quite fit, when I daydreamed about myself being an editor, it was a perfect fit. There aren't too many images of editors in popular culture, but there are enough that I could picture myself being one, combining other people's creative work into a pleasing and complementary unit, making decisions to accept or reject based solely on editorial principles, dressing kind of funny. I'm lucky that now, as editor for the Nebraska Humanities Council, I'm able to do the work for which I'm qualified and which I enjoy. There are writers and artists in the world today who are in some way on the margins. These are people who, for whatever reason, exist on the periphery of mainstream culture. They may have placed themselves there, they may have been placed by others there. When you live on the edge, you see things from a different angle, an angle we all can learn from. When truth comes to us, it comes, no matter what the source. So we need to change our definition. To be marginal means to be valuable. Because we all in some way are marginal, no matter that we occupy center stage in our own life, in the drama of somebody else's life, we are in the margins. I think there should be a remake of the film It's a Wonderful Life, where the angel shows Jimmy Stewart's character, this time played by maybe Harrison Ford, that although he is well loved by his family and his community, they still could have gone on and lived happy and productive lives without him. This would be a very 1990s, very end of the millennium movie, because instead of that realization leading to despair, it would lead to relief. It would show us that no matter who we are or how important we are, nothing that we do or say really makes that big of a difference in the world. So we can and should go about our business with the same commitment and energy, but with a sense of humor about it too, knowing that the world will somehow manage to continue whatever we do. And we should not take any disagreement of opinion too personally, recognizing that our center is somebody else's margin. Okay, and now back to some poetry. This one's called The Man Who Is Always Right. He lives in a one-room house with one window and one door. Every morning, he puts on his pants one leg at a time and walks one-way streets to work at the dead letter office, where he writes dead letters all day. Then he stands at the end of a dead-end street downtown, distributing leaflets that read, "You are wrong." Stare into his eye, and you might fall through the iris, widening and then constricting like a camera lens, and into the pupil, the black inside of an empty box. I try to keep it pretty plain-spoken, not highfalutin, and I try to limit it pretty much to, I think details speak better, say more, than say large, grandiose statements. So I try to let the details and the people and the scenes and the places, kind of like the material objects, sort of suggest more. I don't think it is right to just say, well, I write for me and only for me, because that, you know, you're lying if you say that, because people write to be read. Otherwise, why are you putting it down on paper? So I do want to be read, and I don't even know by who, but I do feel like it's kind of like especially like if you live in a state like Nebraska, where you're likely to use the people around you, the places around you in your writing. You draw from them. If whether or not you're writing about them, in some way they are feeding you. You know, they support you in some way, even if just because they're the people you walk around when you're thinking about other things. You know, they're supporting you, and so I think you owe it back to them to share what you're writing. And they don't have to agree with you, but they should listen to you. So they owe you something too. But, you know, all that time that you spend walking around thinking about whatever, you know, you need to give that back to them and let them hear it. And maybe they'll change a little bit the way they think, or not. But you owe them that insight, I think. That's what a writer gives, is insight. I thank the council for giving me an opportunity to work with a variety of authors, a variety of Nebraska authors, some of whom I would like to see someday at the Heritage Room giving a reading like this, and maybe they've already done it. Authors like Constance Merritt, John Trudell, Annette Murrell, Lenora Castillo, and Kim Calvillo. And also I want to thank them for giving me the chance to be an editor and do the work I love. And also, after having been there a year, I was familiar with the council before I came there. But now, having worked there over a year, I really have a great respect for the many programs they do throughout the state. Let's see. Let me read a little bit from the introduction to the book, Nebraska Humanities, Telling the Stories of Our State. And this book, which was published by the Humanities Council with assistance from the Nebraska Press Association and the Q125 Commission, is a collection of essays by Nebraskans about Nebraska. And I had the pleasure of writing an introduction which kind of gave me an opportunity to read a lot of writers and put them in some sort of context. I won't read the whole thing to you, but maybe just the last section of it. So this is from Telling the Stories of Our State. You will find biographical portraits of individuals who have in one way or another left their imprint on the state. Individuals who could not or should not be forgotten. Marlene Snyder's discovery of a nationally important woman, Clara Bewick Colby, who had been virtually written out of Nebraska history, shows the truth of the commonplace that history is written by the victors. Ron Hull's moving, plain-spoken eulogy for an unpretentious actress, Nebraska native Sandy Dennis, shows us the power of remembered details, retold simply and directly. And you will find essays about the landscape of Nebraska, as much a shaping force in our history as any individual who has lived here. After more than a year of giving voice to a variety of experiences and ideas, what statements can close the discussion? This book is actually the compilation of a year-long series of essays that ran in newspapers throughout the state, and every week it would be a different author who was in some way writing about Nebraska in honor of the state's 125th anniversary. So what statements can close the discussion? Perhaps that these varied essays emphasize the importance of story in history. History is not just the past, but how each of us perceives the past and the way we tell the story of our past. What we choose to remember and what we choose to forget affects the way we live our daily lives. This is why our individual stories are fundamentally important to our lives and our culture, and why the preservation of these stories is essential. Now, because of this book, the discussion need not be closed. We hope having these columns collected and reprinted in one volume will keep us reading, thinking, and talking, and will keep the dialogue running. Let's see, I think it was maybe December of, I don't remember what year, but I was a graduate student, and I was working temporary jobs to attempt to pay my bills. And I was working at, actually it was, I think it was the factory for Nebraska bookstore. And I pulled into the parking lot. This was when they were way out at, on Cornhusker Highway. And I pulled in, I think it was my last day to pick up my final check. And as I pulled into the parking lot, I saw it was somebody had run over a pigeon, but it was not completely killed. And it was odd how strongly that affected me, considering all the things that I've seen or that anyone sees in their life. Why would, like, a half-dead pigeon, make a big impact? But it did, and I think because it kind of stood for something else. So here's that poem, Half-Dead Pigeon in a Warehouse Parking Lot. It throbbed on its side like a wind-up toy soldier upended. One reticulated claw shoved the feathered lump brutally out of the flow of traffic. A wing stretched perpendicular from the asphalt, letting the harsh daylight cut between feathers like a surgeon separating muscle from bone. It is very quiet outside, only the sound of my car's engine grumbling, the wind confusing bare branches, the imagined noise of a wing's jerks and flaps. Inside the warehouse, it is business as usual, but the headless mound keeps limping, It stippled back, dragging across the immutable pavement. It would be also a thesaurus poem. Where you like think what you want to say and then flip open the thesaurus and pick a different word. Well, I think kind of to be humble, to not, I don't know, just to sort of respect the world around you and to respect the people around you, and to appreciate them and to value them. I think also in my writing I try to stop time. I want to fix memory. I want to preserve. I write to make a record, to save, because we forget. It needs to be written down. Here's a poem that I wrote. It's called Walking Home. I wrote it, the first version of it when I was at the Writers' Workshop at the University of Iowa. In Marcia Southwick's class, and Marcia ended up coming to Nebraska and becoming a Nebraska writer herself. I wrote the first version of that there, and then years later I submitted it to Midwest Quarterly, and Stephen Meets, the editor there, wrote back to me and said, "Great poem, here's my suggestions for revision." And being a composition teacher and an editor, I was not offended by that, and I simply used his advice and rewrote the poem. So I came up with a different poem, but it's also, I feel like I have two poems. The first one that was the poem somebody in their 20s would write, and then this one, which is a poem that somebody in his 30s would write. So here we go. Walking home. I want to know what the trees know, so I study the torn bark of an oak, series of indentations in a maple leaf, network of veins, as if reading tea leaves in a cup, and learn that words are tied up with places, the way breath in winter rises and is trapped in the branches of a linden tree, or the way chestnuts are buried in packed dirt. I had a thought while looking at a blackthorn that became the blackthorn's own, and now it judges me as I pass. I could speak the words linked to this place if I could trace the feathery pattern of evergreen past the bough, past gestures the branch will make in the wind. The elms have been here longer than I and can see farther than I, past saw-toothed leaves to bare black horns of winter. Let's see. This next poem was part of the series I was trying to write where I was using my family as inspiration. And this one would be about my mother, and it's called Cold, Flat, Sweet. Okay, Cold, Flat, Sweet. I want to show you the empty cafe on Broadway, Council Bluffs, Iowa, where my mother took me when I was 5, before divorce, before trips to bars where she would buy me Coke after Coke after Coke, whose bubbles clung, rose, burst. But what does that matter? All that matters is the cafe, empty but for me, my mother, and the waitress. Look at a square room with glass walls, the perfect square of a gray tabletop, locked in the center of the grid of the linoleum, square within squares within square, slanted bolts of sunlight propped against windows, the clean circle of the glass's rim, the clear cylinder containing opaque chocolate milk, a transparent parabola of brown where the action of raising the glass has sloshed milk up the sides, fixed by the glass, not unlike your thumb and index finger wound through the coffee cup's handle. The next poem kind of incorporates just about all the members of my family, and it's called Jumping Down. Also, I think in my writing, I try sometimes, maybe not try, but it just happens that I end up writing about writing. And that might have something to do with being in school for a large part of my life, where you just tend to analyze and interpret things as a teacher and as a student. So this is a poem kind of about my family, but also it's a little bit about writing, and it's a little bit about the act of reading. And it's called Jumping Down. If we jump down the page together into the kitchen of my childhood home in Council Bluffs, where Grandma Carol spins an opener around a can of Campbell's tomato soup, we'll see me sitting on the counter. But Outside, up, my eldest sister, Vicky, is poised to jump from the garage roof and fly like Superman, like Art Linkletter's daughter. As we stand on the ground, cheering her on, she will survive the fall. Don't worry, we always do. But how many Batman episodes and Mighty Mouse cartoons did it take to get her up there? How many times did my grandma politely ask me to jump down from the kitchen counter? What is a saint, we asked in CCD. Someone like Joseph or Mary or Grandma, I thought. Her high cheekbones, her cat eye glasses with the aluminum rosettes, her blue veins. How many times did she ask me until she finally ordered, "Get your butt off the counter"? And so, in the words of my youngest, newly married sister, who turned toward the passenger seat and said to me years later, as her Honda Civic spun off the icy interstate, "Grab hold, take my hand, because this is where we jump off." My nightmare is that I will end up reading the same poem twice without realizing. I was saying at dinner before the reading that there's only a few poems that I like, and maybe I could just read the same poem 10 times in a row. But then my nightmare was that maybe nobody would recognize that I was doing that. This next poem is called Euphoria, which was published in a really cool little magazine that Dave McCleary used to put out called Leaves of Grass. Euphoria walks in wearing fresh laundered clothes, and gravity seems right. The coffee cup is neither too heavy to lift, nor so light that the arc of your arm sends liquid flailing over your head. Roll down your window on the way to work, see those clouds ballooning over the fields. They have unfurled for your perception of them, and snap shut like a window shade. No, that movement is too jerky, too abrupt, and roll back up like the map of Gaul your high school Latin teacher had finished showing the class when you turn your gaze back to the gray ribbon ahead. Take the dip in the road at 65. Your heart flies up to your head where it belongs. Your spirits lift with the suspension system. At work, the tools on your desk take form when you need them. The blue medium point pen finds your hand. Do you notice how the liquid paper bottle fits your palm perfectly? Rubber bands rise up to your fingertips. Paper clips dissolve in the darkness of a closing drawer. It was you who closed it. After the office has disappeared with your twist of a knob, knowing it will materialize tomorrow, stand on the stoop for a second. Air fills your lungs effortlessly, buoying you into the hour, which happens to be rush hour. Your chest rises up as if breathing were our mode of transportation. Have I read Among Trees yet? Hey. Among Trees. When you find yourself alone, go ahead and fit the rucks and folds of an old maple's bark to the space between your thumb and index, or stand back and watch the foliage shift like a vocabulary. The trees on your block nod their heads and rub shoulders like old friends. It is safe here. Light slices through the leaves, leaving foreground blue, background yellow, making everything clear, distinct. You can count on the trees, at least, to whisper whatever words you need to hear. Nobody asks the trees what they want either, and still their true green blots out fire escapes, trash containers, parking lots, ugly backs of apartment buildings. Among trees you are alone. It is among trees you'll last. I want to thank the Heritage Room for really, I think, doing a way cool job of preserving and encouraging and developing a sense of Nebraska as having a literary history and heritage, and for us to see that as an ongoing, living thing and not just something that happened in the past. Okay, well, I think I'll close with this last poem called Lamp, Vase, Mirror, which was published in Whole Notes, edited by one of my favorite authors, Nancy Peters Hastings. And this poem I submitted to Nancy, boy, I don't know how long ago, but I remember when I first sent it in to her, She also, like Stephen Meeks did, sent it back with a note suggesting some revisions, which I did. I mean, I did some of the things that she said. I did other things that I thought of on my own, and there are some things she asked me to do that I did not do. But anyway, that happened once, and then it happened 4 more times. And at the time, it may have been somewhat trying. I mean, I'm sure it was a test of some sort, but really, I thank Nancy for spending that much time looking at my writing that closely, because I do feel like the end product is a lot better than what I had sent her. So when people criticize your writing, don't hate them. They're doing you a favor by paying that much attention to words that you have put down on paper. So here we go. Lamp, vase, mirror. One day you may stop going to your favorite bar, the one with high ceilings, even though you will continue to live just blocks away. One Sunday you might pick up a book you've owned for 12 years and read 100 pages. Or maybe you'll move, perhaps from a town with a river to a town with no river, and one night you will need the mist on the flat blue water. When still young, you will miss crossing one bridge and looking at 2 others stagger down the river like younger sister, youngest brother. Be careful. Listen more than you talk. Step carefully. Speak carefully. Thank you very much.